Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Connor.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to Submission Radio, UFC Vancouver breakdown. Dennis Crowder here with Kasper Rozalowski on our way back, or we just got back quite recently from UFC 202 in Vegas. So not a normal show for you guys this week, but we will be breaking down the very fun card at UFC Vancouver and a lot of stuff to talk about from that. And joining us on the program right now, and this has been a long time coming, guys, because he is a close friend of the show, a close friend of mine and Casper's. We have so much fun with him when we're over in Las Vegas. He does great work for the Las Vegas Journal. He has awesome breakdowns with Heidi Fang, and his silky smooth voice is on ESPN 1100's Cofield and Co. Adam Hill, welcome to your first episode of Submission Radio.
Well, let's be honest, guys. I mean, I begged you to come on. That's what happened. I was like, you guys, I really want to come on. Please have me. That's how I got on.
That's all lies. In fact, it was quite the opposite. We had to pay you a handsome sum of money to come on the show and give us your time and give us your thoughts. And Dennis, you mentioned he's a good friend of the show, but not only that, when we go to Las Vegas, Adam Hill is officially in charge of making sure that we go around town and get fed with only the finest cuisine. Adam is basically showing us all the best spots in Vegas. So if it wasn't for Adam, we probably wouldn't even be alive at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, listening to Mace's first CD in the car was a highlight from our last trip when we went down to watch UFC 202 and cover it for Submission Radio in Vegas. Now, before we jump to this breakdown of UFC Vancouver, Cass, you and me, we watched the fight from Press Row in Vegas. It was sort of high up in the arena. We watched it on the screen. We came out with the opinion that Nate Diaz won. If you guys didn't watch a post-fight breakdown, a lot of opinions in the comment section below. A lot of people sort of wondering how we came to that conclusion. So we sort of went back to the vault. We went back. We watched it on TV. We watched it again just to give you guys our sort of thoughts on it now that we watch it properly on TV. Casper, we did this quite recently. We did this yesterday. Adam, I don't know, before we jump to our opinion of how we watched it, just quickly, how did you see the fight going after you watched it live in Vegas? Who did you have winning that fight?
Yeah, you know what? And before I even say that, I'll say that you guys might have got a good lesson, and I'll see what your take is after watching it on TV. But, you know, a lot of times the angle on TV and the angle from up close, you know, cage side where I'm sitting, and the angle from the press box, it's three totally different angles. You see different things. You know, when you're watching on TV, you see exactly what the camera wants you to see. So I think a lot of times, you know, you have media people scoring a fight at the fight, and people at home are like, oh, you guys are idiots. You have no idea what you're talking about. Well, you're only seeing exactly what the camera wants you to see. And, you know, to be fair on Press Row, you're only seeing one angle of the fight as well. So sometimes if a guy's back is turned to you a lot, you can't really see, you know, what he's doing. So there is a lot to perspective when you're scoring fights. And I think people don't really quite get that all the time. But I'll say this, watching the fight, I actually thought it was a fairly easy fight to score. And I did the same thing. I went back and watched it on TV like you guys did. But I came to the same conclusion I did fight night. Conor McGregor won round one. I thought he won round two as well because he was controlling almost all of it. Now, Nate Diaz had a lot of success at the end of the round, but I thought the round as a whole, when you score it, Conor McGregor won. Obviously, Nate Diaz won round three. I didn't give him a 10-8. I don't have a huge problem with it, but Nate Diaz won round three. Conor McGregor came back. I was shocked because I thought he was finished, but he won round four, in my opinion, and then Nate Diaz won round five. So I had basically 3-2 Conor McGregor at the fight, and then when I rewatched it, I thought the same thing.
Well, Casper, tell us what you thought when you rewatched it on TV. I'm curious to hear your perspective. Did your thoughts change from our original thoughts in Vegas?
Yeah, and also to Adam's point, I mean, I guess another thing you got to remember is also the crowd, the way the crowd sort of interacts with the fight. Sometimes it may sway you a certain way. And I've been to fights where I've sat on press row and I've watched fights a certain way and I think, wow, this guy's getting destroyed. And then you watch him back on your TV and you think it really wasn't as bad as you initially thought. But as far as this fight goes, I definitely give McGregor the first round. I mean, he obviously dropped Diaz once and he was very active. The third round, I definitely give to Diaz because, Conor essentially looked tight. It was Diaz's best round of the night by far. I agree with you. It wasn't a 10-8. There was still a lot of missed shots by Diaz. I think initially watching the fight, I thought a lot more of them actually landed when in fact they didn't. Round 4, watching that live, I thought it was a really close round. Watching it back, I don't think it was a really close round at all. I think Conor was a lot more active. He had far better counters. He reset a lot. He hit a lot of good body punches. And Diaz's jab, which in the past has been a really good weapon, it missed a lot. So round 4 to Conor, and then round 5, Conor at this point had slowed down significantly, so I'd give the round to Diaz. He obviously had good strikes in the clinch, and he sort of got that round at the end with a takedown. The second round, which I think a lot of the people were debating, is what I initially gave to Diaz. Looking back on it, I don't really see how I gave it to Diaz. McGregor dropped Diaz twice. Okay, it wasn't shots where Diaz was close to being finished. He sort of fell on his ass, and he looked like he was completely awake, but nevertheless, he did get dropped. And that comeback at the end of the round by Diaz, it wasn't nearly as effective as I initially thought. It was actually a lot shorter, and I don't think he really hurt McGregor all that much. A lot of those shots were missed, so yeah, I'd give round 2 to McGregor. So round 1, 2, and 4 to McGregor, Diaz round 3 and 5. So pretty much I came to the same conclusion that a lot of other people did. Took me a little bit longer, but there you go. McGregor wins the fight. I don't think it's a controversy. Dennis, were you swayed? Do you have a different opinion, or do you still think Diaz won?
No, I agree the club. I'm jumping on the bandwagon. I agree with you guys. And it was that round 2 that was the temptress for me. After rewatching it, I also thought, what the hell was I thinking? And put myself in an MMA corner, looked at the wall, and cried myself to sleep for many a night. But there you guys go. And Adam, you got a great point there, man. I mean, different perspectives from different positions. And after I rewatched that fight, much like you, Casper, I thought, yep, what was I thinking? Comments deserved. But we appreciate you guys tuning into the post-fight show and giving us your opinion. We always love hearing it. Casper, before we move on from this topic, any sort of closing words on it? Anything for the Irish fans that sort of believed that Submission Radio was Team Diaz and was a bit biased towards him?
You know, I'm glad you brought that up. There's no bias whatsoever. I respect the hell out of both guys, both Nate Diaz, both Conor McGregor. I know a lot of people sort of see it and think, well, you guys interviewed Richard Perez, Gilbert Melendez, and Jake Shields. You're essentially interviewing Team Nate Diaz, and then Nate Diaz himself the following day, which, by the way, for the record, is an interview that I'm not proud of. I feel like, I personally dropped the ball a lot with that interview, didn't ask a lot of questions that I should have, but a lot of these sort of things were spur of the moment. It wasn't intentional that we were interviewing Team Diaz. It just sort of happened that way, A lot of this sort of depends on the contacts that you have. And listen, anyone from Team McGregor is always welcome on the show, whether it's Kavanagh, whether it's McGregor himself, but sometimes the stars don't align. So anybody that thinks we were on Team Diaz more than McGregor, it's simply not true. It was an amazing fight, and even in that post-fight show, we gave a lot of respect to both men, both McGregor and Diaz. So I'm telling you now, there's no bias whatsoever.
Yeah, that's right. Owen Roddy, we got a chance to speak with him, but unfortunately John Kavanagh was unable for the interview. And Conor McGregor, guys, I mean, who would have thought knocks back an interview with Submission Radio? You'd think we'd be number 1 on his list after the fight finishes, but nevertheless, maybe next time. And anyway, let's move on to UFC on Fox. I mean, this was a very, very fun card. A lot of people didn't really pay much attention to it because there was so much stuff going on, but Maia versus Condit, I mean, goddamn, that is a fight that a lot of people were really looking forward to. I want to jump to the last fight of the prelim card, the main one between Sam Alvey and Kevin Casey. Adam, Sam Alvey, Kevin Casey. Did you expect Alvey to put Kevin Casey away the way that he did? Or did you think now that Casey sort of, had a little bit of success, the run sort of begins for Casey?
Yeah, you know what? I did have Alvey. I got a lot wrong tonight, an awful lot wrong tonight, actually. It was a terrible night for me as far as picking fights, but I did think that would go that way. Alvey he just has that power, and he doesn't look like he's throwing huge shots, but everybody he hits really feels it. And, I just thought if he was able to land a couple good ones, that he would be able to put Kevin Casey away. And Kevin Casey obviously wanted to get the fight down to the mat, wasn't really able to do that. But, man, he was able to take some big shots. Didn't get put away right away, but he stayed in there, stayed tough, and Alvey eventually put him away. But I think what most people remember from that fight is not even really the knockout, as impressive as it was Sam Alvey after the fight. I think there were some mixed feelings out there. I don't know, guys. I'll get your opinion. He annoys me a little bit with that stuff. Maybe I'm just crazy. I don't know. People were like, "Oh, that's funny." I don't know. It's like a character that he's doing, and it's weird.
Casper, we spent some time with Alvey and his family in a hotel room in Adelaide. And look, that sounds a bit sus. Basically, we were interviewing him and we spent some time with his wife and the kids were there. They were all cramped up in this one room with the coach. And we sort of got a chance to see behind the scenes of how they sort of pre-plan and post-plan what Alvey's going to be saying and the people that he's going to be calling out. What do you think of Adam's comments and the comments on the internet? A lot of people felt like it was a little bit pre-rehearsed, pre-planned, and a little bit strange in the post-fight interview section of the fight.
Yeah, I definitely think Sam Alvey's sort of getting onto this whole, I wouldn't really say bandwagon, it's just the movement in MMA where it's all about being a talker, it's all about being a personality. The thing is, I think regardless, Sam Alvey is and always has been a personality. He's got the smile. We can all remember the sponsor disaster of '86 where he had that spray tan on him, the short shorts at the Daisy Dukes at the weigh-in. So he's a character, but when he gets on the mic, he's definitely had smoother nights. I'm with Adam. I didn't really like this one. It dragged out. It was extremely awkward. You do get those hits and misses. I know with Ben Rothwell, it sort of took a while for him to sort of craft this character. And Ben Rothwell, in some ways, is kind of awkward, but almost in a lovable way. Sam Alvey leans to the sort of like, all right, let's wrap this up. We sort of need to get on with the next fight and end this post-fight interview. It seemed like he rehearsed a little bit too much, and he didn't remember it, and it was a little bit all over the place. We remember when he knocked out, I think it was Dan Kelly, and he called out Elias Theodorou. That was in, I think, Adelaide. That was much smoother. It was more to the point. I think with Sam Alvey, he's a guy that needs to speak from the heart and not really memorize things like that. And I think he'll, sort of come across a little bit better. What did you think, Dennis?
Yeah, I mean, look, bombs need to be dropped. It went a little bit too long, and it was a little bit too nice. Adam, I know you and me, we like it when guys are ferocious in there and just dropping bombs on people. So it was sort of without a point. I agree with you guys. I think it was a little bit of a fail, but I'm going to criticize Sam Alvey as a fighter right now because I'm legitimately worried about this guy, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on what I'm about to bring to the table. I think, look, Alvey is a very, very talented fighter, but he's chasing the KO too much in his fights, and I feel like he's a well-rounded guy. He's got skills in every area, but he's just focused too much on that counter knockout. And I think now that he's beat Casey and we're wondering, who's going to be next for him, if he does make it back up the ladder. And by the way, he had a couple of losses quite recently against some top-level guys. If he does make it back up to that level, he has to have a more well-rounded game and a less predictable game if he wants to make it anywhere in this division. Now, Adam, I want to get your thoughts. Is Alvey just sort of playing towards the bonus, I just want to have the fun fight of the night crowd? Or do you think he legitimately thinks that with his style, he can actually go on and win a title in the division?
Yeah, he doesn't fight like a guy that's trying to shoot for a title. I mean, I know everybody is, but I think you're right. I think it's, he's going for bonuses. He's going for entertainment. And, let's face it, his best path really is the knockout. He's got that power in his hands. You're right that this is not conducive to making a big run because at some point, the style isn't all about winning. It's about entertaining. So I can agree with you there. But, I think if you're just trying to carve out a niche, be an entertaining fighter, and, make some bonus money along the way, I think that's what he's kind of shooting for. I think he's trying to be an entertainer that's in demand and is popular and people want to see him fight and he makes some money. And, he's not out there to win. I make sports references a lot, and I have to try to figure out exactly which ones to make when I'm on with you guys. I don't know many Australian rules football references or stuff like that, but I know that you guys saw some basketball players, here.
Dwight Howard asked me for a photo with him. Adam, you were there. You saw.
Yeah, that's why I was getting at that. So basketball, but it's it's more like one of these teams that they're going to decide, hey, we're just going to go and we're going to try to score 140 points a game. We don't care if we give up 150. We want to entertain the fans, and a lot of times we're going to get wins along the way, and we're going to win 140 to 132. But that's not championship basketball. I think that's kind of how how he's looking at it. He's there to entertain and to put on a show. And I don't, obviously if he puts together a streak and wins 6 or 7 fights in a row, he's going to be in that title mix. But I think that's not really his main objective right now with the way that he's going about it.
So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see who he gets next as well, because he's been down to a lot of Australian cards. He's been in a lot of Aussies. Who knows? Maybe he'll come back down to this Melbourne card. He mentioned that he wants to fight in October as well. So we'll see what happens next. But, guys, let's jump to the main card. Jim Miller versus Joe Lauzon. Now, what I love about this fight is both men came out relatively unscathed from UFC 200, and then the UFC just books them straight away in this rematch. And, I mean, the first fight was just an all-out classic. Such a fun fight. And in a lot of ways, a lot of people sort of forgot that this was on the main card of this event. I mean, I really thought that they could have gotten something extra out of this fight if they put it even on a UFC 203, a card that I feel like really needed a couple of extra big fights, especially after, the injuries that have plagued it. Casper, watching the fight, did it live up to the first classic to you, and what were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I thought this was a super fun fight. The entire time, it was back and forth. There was ebbs and flows. I think the story of this one was the controversy at the end, or whether you see it as a controversial ending or decision as far as the scoring. I can actually say that after rewatching this fight, I had a chance to quickly rewatch it. This is a super, super ridiculously close fight, and I don't think it was nearly as much of a robbery as I initially thought. Watching it live, I thought Lauzon clearly won the fight. He controlled Miller on the ground for pretty much every round. But the thing is, when you watch that fight, Lauzon, even though he was on top, he didn't really do a whole lot of damage. You see Miller throwing a lot of elbows from the bottom. He was able to get back up, and really during the standing exchanges, it was Miller that was throwing the big shots. He was landing very good body shots. He was able to counter Lauzon, and Lauzon's biggest weapon in this fight was the jab. And there was also a moment in the second round, which is a bit unfortunate. I don't know if you guys picked up on it. The takedown that Lauzon got, or when he ended up on top, so when he actually threw a knee at the same time as Miller threw a left body kick, he ended up kneeing him in the balls. And so for the next sort of 30 seconds, minute or so, Miller was essentially just trying to recover. And even still, he was throwing elbows from the bottom. So I actually don't think it was as much as a robbery. In fact, I don't think it was a robbery at all. I can definitely see how Miller won that. I'm curious what you guys think as far as the scoring. Adam, what did you think as far as the scores? Did you think it was a robbery? Did you think it was fair?
Yeah, I thought it was really, really close fight. I think robbery gets used a little too much, so I'm not going to call it a robbery. But here's why I do think it was incorrect. First round, clearly Jim Miller won. I think most people would agree on that. The second round, I thought Lauzon won that round. I thought it was pretty clear to me that he won that round, and I thought the fight would come down to the third round. And what was interesting about that round was Miller landed some huge shots early in the round. Lauzon got a takedown. You said he didn't do much. He really didn't do anything from the top, but he was on top for much of the round. So I thought it would come down to how the judges scored that third round. Do they score the big shots Miller landed early, or do they score the fact that Lauzon was essentially on top doing not a whole lot for 3 minutes? But in the end, the scoring actually came down to the second round because one of the judges gave Miller round 2, and that's why he won the fight. So, Miller winning round 2 on one of the cards is why he wins. And I thought round 2, again, you watched it again. I haven't watched it back, but I thought round 2 was pretty clear. I thought it was Miller 1, Lauzon 2, and then a toss up in the third. But the fact that Miller got, round 2 on one of the cards is what leads to the victory. And I think that's where it becomes a little bit controversial because I didn't think there was that much question in the second round. Now, again, you saw it again. I didn't. So maybe I'll go back and watch it again later. But that's where I thought it was controversial. I thought overall, yeah, it was a really, really close fight. But just the fact that he won round 2 on one of the cards was very strange to me.
I think most of us would agree that round 3 was Lauzon. Even though Miller was sort of teeing off with the big shots, Lauzon actually had a lot of success with his jab. He got the takedown, didn't do much damage, but he did go for the armbar right at the end, so I think that one sealed it for Lauzon. With round 2, again, I wouldn't argue too much either way, but there was just that moment where Lauzon got on top of him. He went for what looked like a Kimura or a key lock, and then again, it was another back and forth moment where Miller went back for... it was almost like a triangle attempt, and then he was smashing Lauzon off the bottom with elbows and with punches. That's probably why I scored it not too confidently, but I just edged it for Miller in the second round.
Well, I'm on Adam's gravy train here. I got Lauzon number 2 and 3. The thing that really disappointed me about this fight, because it was a great fight, was the opportunity to have the awesome rubber match if Lauzon won this one. I felt like, a lot of people wanted to see it, and the internet was just blowing up with everybody going, rubber match, you want to see this rubber match? And then afterwards, not only does Miller win, but he sort of gives everybody the impression that he's done with fighting Joe Lauzon as well. So not even a third fight with, a couple of losses there. I guess it doesn't make that much sense. But it's an interesting situation because here we have a Jim Miller, and he looked very, very sharp in terms of his striking. He looked very, very motivated here. Adam, I'm curious to hear, do you think Jim's got another run left at him to actually make it all the way up to the top and possibly, challenge for the title in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I don't think so. And I love Jim Miller. I think he's not only a great guy, he's a great fighter. He can do a little bit of everything. He's one of those, those old school guys that are just tough. He's got great skills on the ground. He's such a gutty striker. He's got power. Can do a little bit of everything. I just don't know, especially in that division, which is a really crowded division. I don't know that he's got what it takes at this point in his career. He's just been through so many battles and so many wars throughout his career. I don't see it. Now, that's not to say he can't do it. It's just not a guy I would label and say, all right, that's a guy that's going to make a big run. He's going to be in good fights. They're going to put him on enough cards that, that give him attention and get people to want to watch him. But he seems like a much older guy than 32. He's 32 years old, but to me, he just feels older because he's been in so many battles. And you can only do so much, you can have so much wear and tear on your body. It's like, Lauzon is still a guy that's a fairly young guy, but he's been through so many wars. I think it's kind of the same way. I just don't see, Jim Miller putting that kind of a streak together. Not that, listen, you put him in a fight tomorrow with any of the top contenders. Does he have a good chance to win? Certainly he does. I mean, any given night, he could beat anybody. But I just don't think he can find that consistency at this point to make a run.
Well, Lauzon sort of reminds me of an MMA version of Matt Damon for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe it's the whole Boston thing. But if Matt Damon had bigger ears and Lauzon had a more successful career and was like a champion for the amount of years that Demetrius Johnson was champion, I'd love to see Matt Damon play him in a movie. But alas, who knows? Maybe he can have an extra role in the Conor McGregor movie if he becomes a lightweight champion. What's that?
Write the Joe Lauzon story. Write the Joe Lauzon story. Make it a film. Get some funding together and cast Matt Damon.
Well, what about you, me, and Casper? Do you think we have what it takes to write a movie? I mean, he did it with Ben Affleck. They won an Oscar. Matt Damon did. Can we do the same thing?
If we get Matt Damon on board, I think we can write it. But I think writing a Joe Lauzon movie, it's going to be tough to get funding.
I feel like getting Matt Damon on board is the easy part. I think writing the actual movie will be a little bit harder. But I think Matt Damon would love to be, part of a Submission Radio feature film.
I feel like we'll get our people to talk to Matt Damon's people, and then maybe we'll be like, look, Matt, not only do you have to be in this movie, but you have to pay for it yourself. He's a nice guy. I feel like it's something that he'd be keen on. But let's move on. Let's move on to the card, guys, because Australia was alight when they saw Bec Rawlings was going to fight Paige VanZant. And I don't want to be unpatriotic here because I love Australia, but I wasn't really giving Bec much of a chance in this fight. I mean, her performance against Lisa Ellis was impressive, but Lisa, let's be honest, wasn't really at the level of a UFC fighter in that fight. And Sergey Ham, actually, that fight, it was okay, but it didn't really impress me. Even though I did think that Ham was going to beat her and Rawlings won, I was still not that impressed. Going into this one, I actually thought Van Zant was going to steamroll through her. Casper, I want to jump to you first. We all know how the fight finished with that really cool TKO flying head kick and punches, but a lot of people on the internet aren't really impressed with Paige Van Zant's performance in that first round. What was your takeaway from that fight and thoughts on Paige Van Zant's performance?
Before I get to that, I will say I actually gave Bec Rawlings quite a big chance in this fight. I thought the odds had it pretty spot on. With Paige Van Zant, I guess you got to remember that she was away for quite a long time. She was on Dancing with the Stars. And Bec Rawlings, she is one of the harder punchers in the division. Paige Van Zant does take a lot of damage. So I definitely saw, a situation where Bec Rawlings would potentially even finish her on the feet or TKO her. As far as the first round for Van Zant, I mean, she was way too far on the outside. She was going completely against her usual game plan, which would be to, bull rush in, get in the clinch, and take her opponents down. I don't think it really worked for her. Brian Stan did a very good job of obviously explaining what was happening in the sense that if you want Bec Rawlings to sort of tie herself out, you need to get a little bit closer, you need to get her to commit. Bec Rawlings wasn't really doing any of that, and she wasn't committing. At the end of the round, that's where she had a little bit more success. Paige Van Zant did, where she got in a little bit closer, and she did get a few shots. But even in the early goings, anytime Paige Van Zant would close the distance, Bec Rawlings would fire off a lot of good shots. She countered her a lot. So it wasn't a good round at all for Van Zant. I mean, I can't take anything away from her because obviously she got the knockout, but had she not gotten that knockout, it would have been interesting to see how that fight played out, a little bit longer. Because in my mind, and I think in most people's minds, she definitely lost the first round. That went to Rawlings.
Well, Adam, I mean, we all saw what happened in the fight with Rose. A lot of people sort of gained respect for Paige VanZant because of the heart that she showed and the fact that she was able to hang in there. But now after this fight, a lot of people saying the 22-year-old maybe hasn't improved as much as people hoped. Do you think she loses some steam with this win? Is that possible? Is it possible to lose steam with a jumping head kick KO?
Yeah, I mean, I think that saved. I think she needed something like that to revitalize her. And I kind of chuckle when you said she showed the heart in that last fight. I can bleed and cry too. I don't really have that much. I don't have that much heart. I mean, she didn't quit. But I think that's a pretty low standard to hold a fighter to. I think we look at her and like, oh, she's this pretty girl and she's so nice and she smiled. Oh, and she didn't give up when that other girl was beating her up. I mean, that's a pretty low standard to hold somebody to. And I'm saying that not as somebody that dislikes Paige. On the contrary, I mean, she's a girl from Nevada, here where I live, a little bit up in the state, but she is from around here. She lived in Vegas for a while. I've known her for a little bit, and I think she's an amazing person. I'm just saying that, when we say that, and I've heard a lot of people say, man, look what she showed in that fight. I didn't get the same thing. I thought it took a lot out of her. And I think the combination of that fight and then going on to Dancing with the Stars and having all these other doors open to her, I thought she was going to lose today. In fact, I picked against her because of that, because I thought it was a case where she had that fight, which was a real eye-opening experience where she just got obliterated for 5 full rounds almost until she mercifully was beaten in the 5th, and then she has this other completely different opportunity out there to go to, and now she's going to come back and get in a cage and have somebody try to beat her up again. I thought it was one of those things where she could walk in there and kind of realize, like, yeah, this is not for me anymore. Why am I doing this? I don't have to. And then she goes and loses the first round. I think we all thought that she lost the first round. All 3 judges had her losing the first round. So it wasn't a great performance. So I think if she would have rebounded and kind of eked out a close decision, I think she could, you could look at her and say, all right, what is her next step? What's she going to do? Is she going to go back and try to film a movie or do something different? But for her to get that kind of a knockout, that's got to be revitalizing to her to say, all right, I did this, spectacular thing. I have a highlight reel to build on and moving forward to do something else. And now, December, there's a card in Sacramento where she trains, not too far from Reno where she grew up, so she can have something to shoot for, and she wants to come back and fight again. But I think she really needed a spectacular moment like that, and it didn't look like it was going to happen. Now that whole first round was not great for her. She was hesitant. She was a different kind of fighter. We've seen the Paige VanZant of old was kind of a bully. She would push forward, try to use her aggressiveness to kind of overwhelm people. And this was a totally different fighter that we saw. And I think some of that hesitancy had to do with, what happened last fight. I think she was kind of thinking in her mind, like, man, I'm going to try to go forward and get mauled again. But, that knockout is exactly what she needed to maybe pick things back up.
And I think not only obviously for her fighting career and obviously mentally as far as confidence goes, but with the UFC investing heavily in her, she spent weeks and weeks on Dancing with the Stars. And I mean, that show, to my knowledge, gets a lot more viewers than any UFC fight nights or pay-per-views. So to be in front of that many people and have that many new followers and that many new eyes on her, and to sort of come in with anything less than a win, not to mention a mauling, would have been devastating for her. But instead, she comes in, she gets not only a win, probably one of the best wins in strawweight UFC history as far as finishes go. I think it did a lot for her, and especially with the UFC moving towards that sort of entertainment field with the new owners. I definitely think it helps her a lot.
And not to bring in the excuse train, but in the post-fight interview, guys, she mentioned that, she was close to pulling out of this fight, one of the toughest camps, and seemed like there was something wrong with her. So I'd be curious to find out what happened there. But Adam, what you don't realize is Bec Rawlings, with a win over Paige VanZant, could be one of the most famous athletes to come out of a little place called Tasmania. We were talking about how they would probably do some kind of welcome back parade for her if she came back to the fair state or the fair place. But unfortunately, it seems like the streamers and the party balloons have to be put away, as there will be no parade. And if there was going to be a parade in Tasmania, Adam, we would fully expect for you to fly all the way down to participate.
Well, she's not as good of an athlete as that devil that cartoon devil that spins around all the time.
True. But he's already had a parade.
It's a great athlete.
Well, that's right. And I mean, maybe he should fight Paige VanZant next. I mean, that's the big question. A lot of people are wondering what's going to be happening for this 22-year-old who seems to have the world at her feet. I mean, guys, before we move on from this discussion, I have to get your thoughts as to who should be next. Tecia Torres was calling her out on Twitter. Casper, who do you think VanZant should fight next in the Sacramento card?
Yeah, I had a look at the rankings. I think a really fun fight would be Valerie Letourneau. I know, Adam, you don't really... Not to say that you don't give credit, but you say it's a low standard to say that Paige VanZant's tough. I think she is tough. I think Valerie Letourneau is also tough. Valerie's coming off a loss. She recently fought for the title. I think if Paige VanZant can fight her, A, I think it'd be a really fun fight. B, if she is able to beat Valerie Letourneau, who, obviously has some skills that would give her a lot of trouble, she would be sort of really close in line for the next title shot, which I think is obviously what the UFC are essentially going for. You look at some of the other women in the division, I think if you give her someone like, say, Carla Esparza, who's ranked number 3, that's a massive shot up. But if Carla Esparza dominates her on the ground and beats her, which there is a high chance that happens, you don't really win much from that. I don't think the UFC are really looking to push Carla. Rose Namajunas, we saw that how that happened. Tecia Torres, you could do that. It could be a rematch. Obviously, Tecia beat Paige VanZant in Invicta, but I feel like Valerie is a more fun fight. It's going to be a lot more sort of crowd-pleasing. What do you think, Adam?
I think keep scrolling. Keep scrolling on that list. I think they need to go almost Sage Northcutt treatment on her for a while. I think you give her 2 or 3 people that she's absolutely going to win, that she can showcase herself against to get her confidence back. I don't think I think the first time around she was really rushed, and we saw that. She bounced up the rankings so quickly, and she's fighting bigger and bigger fights, and then she's in a main event against Rose Namajunas, and she just wasn't ready. She was 21, she's 22 now. It just wasn't something she was ready for. There's time. If she's committed to this long term, as she keeps saying that she is, even though I tried to challenge her on that when I interviewed her the other day. Like, why are you doing this? There's no reason to fight. We know what the pay scale is in the UFC, and she actually acknowledged that the other day. She said, I was on set on Dancing with the Stars with all these other athletes, and they're all talking about how we're all millionaires, including me in the conversation. And I'm like, yeah, I don't make anything. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. I made $40,000 for my last fight. She's not, she looked around and she sees what all these other people are making. And she has the opportunity to do that by going to Hollywood and making movies. So I think if she's going to commit full time to this and she wants to do it long term, you got to build her confidence back up. You got to get her some wins. Don't rush her ahead to fight somebody like, as you said, a Tecia Torres, a Valerie Letourneau, which I agree it's a fun fight, but I don't think that's good for her if she potentially loses that fight. You got to get her some wins and build her back up a little bit before you start jumping her up the ranks a little bit. She's 22 years old. I mean, it's crazy to think about that because she's been around for a while, but she's only 22.
It would be an attractive main event, guys. Michelle Waterson versus Paige VanZant. But that's a tough matchup as well. Waterson's very, very good, and she's coming off a knee injury, so who knows if she'd be ready. But very curious to see what they do with her next, because there is this whole entertainment part of the UFC now, and I wonder if Paige VanZant will be the perfect opportunity for them to start cross-promoting between more entertainment gigs for their fighters, and we'll see what happens there. But look, let's jump to the co-main event, because this one was extremely fun to watch. Anthony Pettis, who, by the way, hasn't won a fight since December 2014. I mean, think about that for a second. Versus Charles Oliveira, his debut in the featherweight division. Before we jump to this fight, Adam, do you think that Pettis going to featherweight was a smart decision for him to sort of kick things back up in his career?
Yeah, I mean, he showed that he can compete. Obviously, a lightweight, he won the title, but he has the deficiencies of, we've seen him. He's good on the ground, but he does get taken down a lot. He's getting better and better at his wrestling. He keeps working on it, but those guys are just bigger than he is, and he didn't really seem to have too much problem making 45, and he actually held up pretty well throughout the fight. There was no real cardio issues, so I think the weight cut was good enough that this might be where he belongs. And listen, 45 is not easy. There's a lot of really, really tough guys down there. But at least, he's more, size-wise, he's on, a level with guys right around him instead of guys that are, 8 to 10 to 12 pounds bigger than him and good wrestlers that can take him down. So, yeah, I think it was probably the right decision.
Well, the fight itself, back and forth, a lot of action. Casper, What did you actually think of Pettis' performance in the featherweight division? Were you impressed what he was able to do against Oliveira, or were you sort of surprised that Oliveira was able to have so many successful moments in the fight himself?
I wasn't really surprised as far as how good Oliveira looked. I mean, we know he is a good fighter. He's always sort of been just below the elite of the division. I know a lot of people are really high on Pettis for getting that finish, and really congratulations to him for getting what essentially was a come-from-behind victory for him, although he did have a very good first round. But yeah, I don't know, Oliveira just sort of, initiating backpack mode, being able to control him like that. I see the same issues that, Adam, you mentioned that he's had at lightweight against guys like Alvarez, against guys like, even Gilbert Melendez early on, against, the Rafael Dos Anjos fight. He still continues to have those issues at featherweight. The other thing to me, I don't know, there was just moments in the fight, especially in the second round, where he just looked lethargic. He looked a bit tired. He looked kind of slow. He was stationary. There wasn't a lot of head movement. I mean, I don't want to be too down on the guy, but this is just one of those things where it's great that he got that guillotine, but I think if he didn't get that guillotine, he would have been potentially looking at maybe a bad decision from the judges. I don't know. This isn't really the kind of win that I look at and think like, wow, bam, there's the new contender. Yes, he went in there, and yes, he beat a guy that's pretty close to the top of the division. I think Charles was ranked number 6 going to this fight. So yeah, it sort of vaults him into the top. But when you look at other guys, even ranked below him, guys like, say, Dennis Bermudez, guys like Frankie Edgar, I don't really see Anthony Pettis doing all that well against those guys if he performs the way he did tonight. Like I said, to me, cardio did seem like an issue, and I think it may just be that this is his first initial drop to featherweight, and he did seem like he was a little bit disappointed. He said that he was going to be, tweaking things here and there. I think he definitely needs to tweak something, whether it's his diet, whether it's his weight cut, but yeah, I don't know. To me, he didn't really seem like a guy who could go in there for a 5-round war. I don't know. I'm curious. What did you think about that, Adam? Do you disagree?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think, like you said, it was the first time he went down there, and I think the difference is when he got taken down at 55, a lot of times he had trouble getting back up. I mean, he can pull off submissions as we saw today. We've seen him do it before, but there was times that he had trouble just getting on his back and not being able to get over. And Oliveira got him in some predicaments tonight, but I think Pettis did a really good job of reversing and staying calm and getting out of some things. And, when he was on his back a couple of times, he was able to just kind of reverse it and get over. And that's, I think, a lot because of, the fact that Oliveira is a little smaller and more his size. I think he just fits in that division better. I would like to see a second cut and see if he looks a lot better. Because you're right, there was times where he looked like he was breathing hard, like it was a little bit difficult for him. But, that is the first time. So that second cut, if it goes even better and he looks even better, I think we'll have a better understanding of how he fits in at 145.
And it's a really interesting question, what happens to him next, because there are some really tough matchups for him. Guys like Dennis Bermudez, guys like Ricardo Lamas, guys like Max Holloway, guys like Frankie Edgar. Adam, do you think Pettis has what it takes to make it all the way to a title shot? Or do you think these tough wrestlers who will most likely put him on his back and hold him there, possibly even for the duration of the fight, will stop him from getting another title shot in the division?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always a question with him. It was at 155. It will be at 145 as well. But, I think I would love to see Pettis, Max Holloway. I mean, that's a really fun fight. But just looking forward, if he is able to become a contender, and not that, Connor's ever going to stay at 145 or come back to 145, but, I mean, Pettis, Connor, how fun would that be? Pettis, Aldo, how fun is that fight? I mean, those are great fights on the horizon if he can win a couple of fights and get into that position. But yeah, as far as next, the Max Holloway, Anthony Pettis would be awesome.
Oh man, Max Holloway, he'll probably have to fight about 1,000 fights before he eventually makes his way to a title shot. And by that time, someone will probably hold the title and want to have a fight in the lightweight division, so he'll have to wait. Cass, your thoughts on the situation?
Yeah, I think with Max Holloway, he's sort of overdue for that Frankie Edgar fight. And if Frankie Edgar is going to be fighting at UFC 205 in New York, I think that could be a really good fight. As far as what's next directly for Anthony Pettis, much like you mentioned about Paige VanZant, Adam, I think that Anthony is still sort of getting his confidence underneath him, getting his feet underneath him, getting used to it. So I think if you sort of vault him in there against a guy like Max Holloway, who at this point is a veteran at 145, I think that might be tough. It's probably going to be a fun fight, but it might be tough. I think giving him a guy like Cub Swanson, who's ranked number 5, who is essentially going to be ranked just one above Anthony Pettis at the moment, who will now be number 6, I think that could be a fun fight. I think that's another fight that sort of would be a confidence builder. Cub Swanson probably going to want to stand up and strike with Anthony Pettis. He's not going to have to worry about someone constantly going for the takedown. I think that's a winnable fight for him. It also gives him a chance to sort of tweak his weight cut, tweak his just in general, his walking around weight and things like that. So for me, I'd sort of build him a little bit slowly. Let Holloway fight a guy like Edgar because he is a lot closer to the title. And yeah, that's the way I see it going. What do you think, Dennis?
Yeah, no, I like those fights. I mean, a fight with a guy like Brian Ortega, I think, guys, that would be a pretty risky fight because I'm really high on Ortega at the moment, and I think that could be a bit dangerous for Pettis at the moment. So I think a fight with Cub Swan loses, I think people would be understanding, but if he wins, it would do a lot for him. So, and I was very interested to see him training at Jackson Winklejohns for this fight as well. I wonder if he's going to keep doing that, and I'd be curious to have a chat with him just to see what some of the differences in his game were going into this fight and how much that helped him, because a lot of people that go over there, much like Overeem, find themselves coming out as changed men on the other side. So we'll see what happens there. But look, let's jump to the main event, because this thing was something that was looked forward to a lot by a lot of the hardcore fans, a lot of the true fans. A lot of people love Carlos Condit. So happy to see him come back. And Demian Maia, I mean, you can't say any better things about him. He's had such a good run as of late, been able to do so many great things. Yet when they ran a poll, the UFC ran a poll to see who fans thought were going to win, most people thought Carlos Condit was going to do it. Now, I'll be honest, I believed Condit was going to beat Maia just because I thought his striking was going to be the difference. I thought he'd be able to keep Maia at distance with his kicks and with his striking and with his footwork. I didn't think Maia was going to get a direct takedown, and if he did, I thought Carlos Condit was going to be able to use his experienced grappling, because he's a good grappler himself, to get out of those dangerous positions. So I thought Condit was going to win it. I was absolutely shocked when I saw what happened in this fight. I mean, you can't really be shocked in the sport of MMA yet. I am still able to be shocked on a weekly basis. Before we talk about this fight, Adam, Casper, I want to get your thoughts first. Who did you guys have winning this fight? We'll go with you first, Adam.
I was wrong about this one too. Like I said, I was wrong about a lot tonight. I thought for the same reasons you said, I thought Condit would win, and it was because Condit, I thought, had a clear edge in the striking, as most guys do against Demian Maia. But I also thought, Condit would be able to keep the fight standing, and then at least neutralize some of what Demian wants to do, on the ground. Not that he'd be able to out-grapple him. Obviously, nobody in the division, and probably the UFC, can really out-grapple Maia. But I thought Condit is a veteran. He's good on the ground. Not great, but he's good enough. I thought he'd be savvy enough to kind of, think one step ahead and at least try to neutralize a lot of that, so that he can maybe at least get up and get back to the feet where he's comfortable. But I think what we saw was a guy who was pondering retirement after the decision didn't go his way last time out against Robbie Lawler. He thought about walking away, and he's like, okay, I'm going to come back. I'm going to give it another try. And then he gets taken down quickly. And I think we saw, kind of that fight just leave him in an instant. And he really didn't, you can't blame a guy for getting admitted by Maia. But I think that we just kind of saw Carlos Condit, not that he quit, but just say, you know what? I should have probably walked away before when I wanted to. I don't know where he goes from here, but I think we saw a lot of the reasons why Carlos Condit didn't really have his mind in the game anymore.
It's a sad thing because you look at this fight and you think whoever loses, they're probably not going to be making another title run. This is kind of the last chance for either guy. Just as far as what I thought was going to happen in this fight, I'm with you guys. I thought Condit was going to win. I definitely thought Maia was going to have zero problems taking Condit down. I mean, we see Condit get out-wrestled by guys like, GSP, Johnny Hendricks, Tyrone Woodley, even Martin Kampmann, who phenomenal, well-rounded fighter in his day, but, not exactly a wrestling machine. So I thought a guy like Maia, he's going to be able to take him down. I thought the sort of key to beating Maia for Condit is going to be to stay outside. But once you're outside, you're against the cage. And, when you're against the cage, you're in Maia's world. And it's almost a formality that if Maia's able to get on you against the cage, you're going to get taken down. What I thought was going to happen was that in around about the fourth round, fifth round, where a lot of other guys sort of don't have the success against Maia. A lot of times they don't even have the chance, the luxury of a fourth or fifth round. That's where Maia starts to fade. I didn't think Carlos would fade. I thought he's obviously got a great gas tank, and that's where eventually he's probably going to stop Maia in the fourth round, maybe even the fifth round. Definitely didn't expect Carlos Condit to get submitted and finish the fastest time he's ever been finished in his career. I mean, you look at fights like, the GSP fight, the Johnny Hendricks fight, the Robbie Lawler fight. All these guys, phenomenal fighters. Most of them will probably be in the Hall of Fame of the UFC. They weren't able to finish Carlos Condit over 5 rounds. And Maia just comes in there and does it, in under 2 minutes. Just amazing, just blown away. I was shocked. Yeah, I was shocked.
It was one of those situations as well where Maia sort of didn't have the rear naked choke locked in at first, and it was over Condit's jaw. And I was thinking in that situation why he wasn't hand fighting more. But the thing that crossed my mind was that Maia is just so damn good that all your training partners, and I mean, he's got some fantastic ones, Ricky Liddell and all those guys are so good, but there's only one Demian Maia. And I feel like unless you go to the ground with Maia in an MMA situation, you don't really understand how good he really is. And I felt like, I don't think Condit underestimated him, but in that position believed he could still get out with that hand over the jaw, had enough time to escape. And unfortunately, in that position, it's almost a win situation from that perspective. But now there's an interesting situation because a lot of people are talking about what's next for Maia. A lot of people wondering whether he should get the title shot over Stephen Thompson against Woodley. Adam, what do you think should be happening in the welterweight division right now? Are you still backing Thompson to fight Woodley for the title next? And if so, then what does Maia do in the meantime?
Yeah, for sure. I don't think there's any question. If you put the resumes, they're both on winning streaks. But if you look at who Thompson has fought and who Maia has fought, I don't think there's any question that Stephen Thompson's resume right now is better and more deserving of a title shot. That doesn't always mean anything because you've got guys like GSP hinting at maybe bouncing back in that mix. They even talked about, and Tyron Woodley talked about it himself. Woodley, Nick Diaz, who the last time he won a fight was like 2004. Him jumping back in the mix for a title fight. So there's all these variables going on, but the scenario for him there, and you talked about Max Holloway having all these wins in a row and not getting his title shot. You look at Demian Maia, who has worked his way back up. He had the one title shot when he was at middleweight. He dropped down to welterweight. He's got all these wins in a row. He thinks he's earned a title shot. Say, just hypothetically, let's say Stephen Thompson, Tyron Woodley takes place maybe in Toronto as a co-main event to a George St. Pierre, Nick Diaz. Let's say those two fights take place in Toronto. First of all, that'd be a great card. But let's say you do that. By the way, the winner of the Diaz-St. Pierre fight is absolutely fighting Tyron Woodley or Stephen Thompson next, right? I mean, you have to think if those guys do fight, and again, I don't know that it's going to happen, but just hypothetically, that means that now, a St. Pierre wins and Stephen Thompson win. Now you've got a St. Pierre Stephen Thompson title fight in March, April. Now Demian Maia is waiting a full year until next summer title fight, and he said tonight he basically said after the fight, hey, listen. I know Stephen Thompson is, next in line. He's getting the title shot. I'm willing to wait. I want to wait. I've earned my title shot. I'm going to wait for it. And so now you're looking at potentially being out, and a lot of things happen. Guys can get injured. Other things can take place. But it's certainly, feasible under that scenario that he would have to wait an entire year to get that title shot that he just earned.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It's one of those situations where the entertainment factor, really clashes with what's fair. I think, Dennis, there is this debate about Stephen Thompson or Demian Maia. I agree with you, Adam. I definitely think Stephen Thompson has earned it. And Brian Stan even mentioned when he was doing the interview that Stephen Thompson versus Woodley is next. Now, I don't know whether that's something that he's been told and it's been made official and it sort of slipped, or the fact that he's sort of reading, MMA news websites like we are, and he sees that that's what Dana White's saying. But I think in a lot of ways, yeah, Stephen Thompson versus Woodley, that's the fight to make next if you don't get a GSP or if you don't get a Nick Diaz. I feel like Demian Maia, still deserving of a title shot, next. I think it's going to elude him for a while. And you know what? It wouldn't surprise me if Demian Maia never gets that title shot. Because like you mentioned, Adam, if GSP or Nick Diaz do return, if they fight each other, the winner comes in, gets that title shot, what do you do with Demian Maia? I feel like he's probably going to take a fight somewhere in the interim. Now, whether that's a fight against Robbie Lawler or potentially somebody else. Apparently, Robbie Lawler is really aching for a fight. It wouldn't surprise me if they do Maia versus Robbie Lawler. Let's say Maia drops that fight, he's all of a sudden out of the running. as has happened with so many fighters in the past. We saw that happen with, Cub Swanson a while ago, where he met Frankie Edgar, and even though he was on a great streak, that all ended. We saw that recently with Frankie Edgar himself. So I don't know, sometimes it seems like guys are surely going to get a next title shot or the title shot after that. It wouldn't surprise me if Maia never got that title shot, especially considering the fact that he does have a phenomenal style, but, and I don't want people to take this the wrong way because they did last time I said this, I love watching Demian Maia fight, but traditionally the UFC isn't high on guys who, are primarily grapplers, and that describes Demian Maia to a T. He's definitely a grappler. You look at guys like John Fitch, Jake Shields, John Madsen, Jared Rochold, they all got the door. I mean, Demian Maia, I don't see him getting fired anytime soon, but I also don't see him getting pushed too far to the title. So it's an unfortunate situation. You got to feel bad for the guy.
So the two guys that sort of pop out of my head that could be next for Maia if he does not get this title shot. I mean, he's 38 years old as well, so it feels like the train needs to keep moving for him so he at least avoids that dreaded ring rust is Robbie Lawler or Cowboy Cerrone. Now, Cerrone's ranked below there in the welterweight division, but it seems like a fight that Cerrone would want to take and a fight that fans would want to see. Adam, if you had to choose someone to fight Maia next, and it's not going to be for the title shot, are those one of the guys that you consider? Is there anyone else that you think might be good for him to fight?
Yeah, I think the Robbie Lawler fight would make sense. And just to go back to the point that you're making, yeah, hardcore fans love jiu-jitsu guys, and we like watching jiu-jitsu guys to see them practice, their art and to put on a beautiful performance like Demian Maia did. But guess what? We don't matter. Hardcore fans don't matter. They're not, these guys are not marketable. Demian Maia is one of the least marketable guys in the entire organization. He's a really smart, really nice guy who is really good at submitting people. That doesn't sell on the corner to, a bunch of people that are just in it for watching guys knock each other out and bleed. And that's what you have to do when you're trying to sell fights and market fights. So, yeah, I think what the UFC would ultimately want is they're pleading for Demian Maia to take a fight and to lose to somebody. That's what they want, because they don't want him in a title shot. They certainly don't want him with the belt. That's for sure. And, you said people get mad at you when you say that. Sorry. Those you people don't matter. You're going to watch anyway, and you have zero meaning in the grand scheme of things. And it's unfortunate because, you would like to say, oh, the sport is about the hardcore fans and the people that really love it. And then have followed it for a long time like we have. But, it doesn't matter in the end because you're going to watch no matter what. So you've got to sell to a different demographic of people. And Demian Maia is not selling to those people.
Yeah, and look, maybe the UFC still hasn't forgiven him for that Anderson Silva Demian Maia fight, although I think a lot of the blame went towards Anderson Silva, but maybe they still have a bad taste in their mouth. But overall, guys, a great event. And before we wrap this thing up, is there anything to you guys that stands out in your mind that you want to bring up before we finish this thing off? Anything from the event, anything in general that you picked up? Casper, I saw a guy in an NWO shirt in the crowd. Is that something that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, I saw a guy in the crowd with an NWO shirt. There you go.
All right, there you guys go. That's the breakdown.
He was sneaky. He almost seemed like a cameraman. I don't know how he managed to do it, but respect to that guy, this mystery man, whoever you were. Just one other thing that I'd like to point out. Jim Miller versus Lauzon, fantastic fight. Where was the blood? I mean, am I the only one who was shocked that it was a phenomenal fight? I'm not taking anything away from him, and I don't want to sound like one of those just bleed guys. I was just shocked that there was no bleeding. The last one ended up in like a swimming pool of blood. This time, no bleeding. I'm just saying, what's going on? Did they really bring it? I mean, come on now.
Yeah, I think it's like when Mr. Burns went to the doctor to get checked out, and he had like one drop of blood left. I think those guys have bled enough in their careers, and there's nothing left. Guys, thank you so much for checking out the breakdown. And Adam Hill, you guys have to follow him at Adam Hill LVRJ. Now, that's Adam Hill LVRJ. As seen on TV, he is absolutely the man to follow. You recognize him from the countdowns and his amazing work over there with Heidi Fang in Las Vegas. Adam, thank you so much for coming onto the program. It's been a real blast having you on the show. I think this is going to happen more often than not. So you better prepare yourself because we love having you on the show and hearing your thoughts.
Anytime, guys, but from now on, every time I come on, I need the Bangs intro music.
Yeah.
Bangs. All right,
You got it.
Quick story.
So-
Bangs is a rapper from Australia. He's an absolutely terrible rapper. I think he's from a place called Dandenong, either Dandenong or Nova Park. He is pound for pound the worst rapper out there, but he did have a hilarious feud with, who was it? Jimmy Fallon. When Jimmy Fallon played his music on the show, basically in a segment about like bad music from around the world or something like that, and then Bangs put out a diss track against Jimmy Fallon and his gross hand. So there you go.
Well, there you guys go. So your homework after listening to this, go on YouTube, type in Take You to the Movies by Bangs. You won't regret it. And think of me, Casper, and Adam Hill while you listen to it. We'll catch you guys next week. We'll be back with a normal show. Have a great week, and thanks for tuning in.